Hi, I'm John Nunn, and in this video I'm going to talk about a new book from Gambit Publications called 1001 Deadly Chess Puzzles. This puzzle book was written by the American author James Visitano. Of course, puzzle books are quite common in chess literature, and we've published a few before ourselves. This one is slightly different, and what I'd like to do in this video is to give you an idea of what you can expect from this book. Most puzzle books are divided up according to theme. There might be a chapter on forks or mating ideas, some other tactical possibilities. This book is slightly different. There are a lot of puzzles of the what you might call the conventional type, but there are also quite a lot which are a bit different. And in these puzzles, you're just asked to find the best move. Well, actually, you're asked to find the best move in practically all the puzzles. But the difference is that you don't quite know what you're trying to achieve. It's a bit like a real game. In some positions, you'll be looking for the only way to defend, and then you'll be happy with an equal position or a draw, or you may be looking for a way to get a slight advantage. In all cases, there's one clearly best move, but you're not sure when you look at the position whether you're aiming for a win or a draw. You have to decide that for yourself. So it's a bit like a game. I'd like to show you three positions from the book to give you an idea of the variety of puzzles that arise in it, and I'll give you the opportunity to pause the video and work the solution out for yourself. Well, first of all, we have this one, which is from fairly early on in the book, and it's one of the kind of test papers in the book. And it's white to play, and that's all you're told. What you have to do, what you have to achieve, you have to work out for yourself. So I'll give you a short pause here, and you can try to find the solution for yourself. Okay, so let's click on the link to find the solution. And this is from a game played quite recently. One of the points I should make about the book is that all the positions are from recent games, so you're very unlikely to have seen more than a handful of them before. Well, the winning move is the spectacular knight jump to f6. This causes chaos in black's position. First of all, it threatens mate in 1 with rook to h7, and a second mate in 1 with queen to g7. There's not much choice for black other than to take the knight with one of the three pieces that he can capture with. He could, for example, take with this rook, but that still allows one of the mates. In this case, the rook is blocking the bishop. It's what chess problem composers call an interference. If he takes with the other rook, it's the same thing. If he takes with the bishop, then there's no mate, but white takes the rook with an easy win on material. Indeed, white's still threatening mate on h7. So it's a kind of chess problem theme, what they call a Novotny interference. It's where you drop a piece onto the square where two important defensive lines meet. In this case, one line is e5 to g7, stopping the mate on that square, and the other line is f8 to f5, which is necessary to defend the rook on f5. Whichever way black takes the intruding knight, he blocks one of these important lines, and white can exploit it. I should mention there's no possibility of defending with rook to f7, because that blocks yet another line, b3 to g8, and white mates with queen g8. So that's a simple, pretty tactics which leads to an immediate decisive advantage. It's the sort of thing you find in chess puzzle books typically. Okay, now I'd like to go on to the second position. This is a little bit different. Okay, it's still white to play, and it's white to play and find the best move. Very often puzzles involve some kind of sacrifice, and I'm not giving you a hint as to whether or not a sacrifice is involved here. But if you just have a look at the position, you can see that black has a material advantage. He's 2 pawns up. In addition, he's got this dangerous pawn on c2. But white has quite a lot of attacking possibilities. He's got all his 5 pieces more or less aimed at black's king side, but nevertheless it's not that easy to break through. The rook defends well along the second rank, and for example the rooks for the moment aren't really pulling their weight. The knight is on the f-file, preventing, for example, the capture of the pawn on f6. So have a think about it and decide how you would continue white's attack. Okay, let's click on the link to the solution. Well, again, a recent game from 2022. Well, surprisingly, the winning continuation doesn't involve any kind of sacrifice, but it is perhaps slightly difficult to see. White starts off with the knight check. That's a good move because black was threatening to take the knight, which would greatly reduce the force of white's attack. So he jumps in with his knight. Now, there are 2 legal moves for black. Moving the king to f8 loses quite straightforwardly. White just sacrifices his rook on f6. Now the rooks are in the game. King to e7 allows, amongst other things, rook takes e6 check with a quick win. And if black tries to save himself by jettisoning his queen, that doesn't work either, because now white has the deadly threat of queen h8 check and mate with queen takes g8. So black actually has to move his king to h8. Now at this point, white in the game went wrong. He played his knight back to f5, and this gives black the chance to defend. He doesn't have to play king g8, which would of course allow white a second bite at the cherry. Instead, black could he could actually just take the knight. He could drop the bishop back to f8 and bring the rook across to h7, and in either case the attack is greatly reduced in force. Now the winning move is a little bit unexpected. White drops his queen back to h5. Normally when you're conducting an attack, you tend to think most naturally of moves that go forwards. Moves that go backwards are a little bit harder to see, even though in this case there's the incredibly strong threat of knight f7 double check, winning the black queen. So white has formed a battery with queen and knight, threatening the discovered check, and black's pretty much out of defensive ideas. If he takes the knight, then the rooks again come into play, and white's going to take this bishop on h6 with his rook. It's pinned at the moment, of course, and then with all 4 pieces attacking a completely denuded king, the end is not far off. The other possibility is for black to move his queen somewhere out of range of the double check, but in this case white uses the queen and knight battery in a different way, giving a discovered check, and then again taking the pawn on f6 and allowing the rooks to come into the attack. As you can imagine, with 4 heavyweight pieces attacking a completely exposed king, it's not going to last long. For example, after this, the bishop comes in and white follows up with rook g6 check or rook f8 check. Black is completely defenceless. The pawn on c2 never played any part in the proceedings at all because white's attack just struck too quickly. So again, this is a puzzle of the type you might find in other puzzle books, but it's a little bit more difficult because there's no straightforward, direct, sack mate continuation. White had to be a little bit clever, and indeed in the actual game white did not find the correct continuation. So now let's go to the 3rd position I've chosen. Here we are, and this is a more difficult example. It's in the chapter on intermediate positions. There are 3 basic sections to the book with some extra smaller sections, and this is the section of intermediate puzzles. You have to find the best move for white here, and here it's a little bit different because white's on the defensive. Black has sacrificed a piece for 2 pawns and clearly has a very dangerous attack. He's threatening, for example, queen takes f2 check. He's also threatening to bring his bishop on c8 into the game by pushing his pawn to f4. And so you have to find a way to stave off black's threats. So once again, I'll give you a chance to think about this position and be back in a few seconds. So let's click on the link and see the solution. Well, the move that was played in the game wasn't the best. White defended the pawn on f2 with his rook, but this allowed black to push his f-pawn, bringing the rook on f8 and particularly the bishop on c8 into the attack. White brought his knight back to cover h3, but by an attractive series of sacrifices, black gained decisive threats. First of all, he sacrificed his bishop, and then he pushed his pawn. If the king moves, then queen takes knight, so white has to take that, and then check with the queen. King has to go to h2, and the rook comes in, threatening mate on h3. There's no real defence. If white gives up his queen, black has a decisive material advantage, while otherwise it's going to be mate in short order. For example, after knight here, we have check, and then check, and finally a mate with the knight. Well, that's not the correct continuation. When I was solving this position, which I actually found, I confess, quite difficult, I've thought of playing bishop f4 because it blocked the f-pawn and stopped black bringing these pieces into the attack. But black takes the pawn with check and then maybe goes back to h4 to threaten the knight fork. And with 3 pawns and some threats for the piece, I think it's clear that black is at least equal here. The correct move is something different. It involves playing the knight to g3 to shield the f-pawn from the attack of the queen. And the continuation given in the book is f4, again trying to bring the bishop into play, which after a pretty much full sequence of moves, I think it's clear that the attack is now petering out. Black doesn't actually have a major threat here, and the white queen can come to g1 to cover the mate on g2. Black pawn on f4 is pinned, it can't advance, and white has enough defensive pieces here to, well, actually to give him quite a large advantage. Once the attack disappears, the bishop on a7 is out of play, blocked in by this pawn, and all white's pieces can become active rather quickly. Well, the reason I didn't like knight g3 to begin with, and I only returned to it after looking at a number of other moves, was I was worried about this move, knight takes f2. And at first sight this looks devastating, because after king takes, black gets his move f4 in, he's threatening to take this knight on g3 with check, and the knight is pinned so it can't be saved, and then black gets his attack by activating these 2 pieces after all. But what you have to see is that white doesn't have to take the knight after knight takes f2. Instead, there's the move knight f3. Now, if black isn't going to just lose the knight for nothing after, for example, queen takes pawn check, king takes knight, he has to allow the exchange of queens. He can do it by either queen takes knight check and knight takes queen, or knight takes queen first. Then, of course, he has a check, but it doesn't help him very much. With the queens off, there's no real attack, and white undoubtedly has a winning position here. So you have to see something a little bit clever, this intermezzo knight f3, which stops knight takes f2 from winning. But like I say, that isn't actually mentioned in the book. And perhaps with as many as 1001 puzzles in the book, it would be too much to hope that every interesting line was mentioned by the author. Had he done so, we would have had a book of 300 puzzles and not 1001. But it does mean that you might have to work a little bit yourself if there's a continuation you're not sure of. Of course, if you're using our app, you can use the built-in engine. And if you're using the Kindle ebook version, you can use a feature which we've now made standard in all our Kindle books, which is that if you tap on a diagram, you're taken to the Lichess website where there are analysis engines available for free. A third possibility, of course, is that you could use your brain and think about the position, which might be a bit uncomfortable, but probably will be ultimately rewarding. So it's a puzzle book with lots of material, huge amount of material in fact. You probably might have to work a little bit more than you do with most puzzle books. It's not just a question of check, check, sack, mate. There are a lot of positions that require careful thought. As I say, I found this one fairly difficult. But that shouldn't put you off. There are a lot of standard type puzzle positions as well. So there's a good variety of positions for you to work on. Okay, that's 1001 Deadly Chess Puzzles, and I hope you enjoyed that, and I look forward to seeing you for my next video.